Hey everyone! On today's video, I'll be sharing some DIYs using these wooden Christmas trees from Dollar Tree. These DIYs will bring that cozy, neutral charm to your holiday decor, so let's dive right into it and get started. So I headed to Dollar Tree and I grabbed several of their wooden Christmas trees, and I'm going to be using a total of 5 for all of today's DIYs. I also grabbed a couple of their 12-inch 1x2s. I'm going to stain the wood using acrylic paint, and I'll be mixing Territorial Beige and Khaki from Apple Barrel. And to thin out the paint so that it does go on like a stain, I add some water and then I mix it up. So I brush that on all over, and I'm just using a brush to apply that. And then I wipe it down immediately with a paper towel before it dries to remove any excess paint. And then I turn it over and I do the same thing on the other side, just brushing on that paint mixture and then wiping it down with a paper towel before it dries. For the 1x2s, I brush on the color as well, and then I wipe it down. I will be gluing these together side by side, so I do avoid applying the paint to the areas that will be glued. I glue the 1x2s together, so I just apply some glue on the sides, and I'm using wood glue, but you can also use hot glue or a combination of the two. I picked up the stencil pack from Amazon. It's a set of 12 with various Christmas patterns, and I love the designs on these. They're really nice. I will be covering the trees with the snowflakes, so I place a stencil on top. It's not going to cover the whole tree, but it looks like the ends do connect, or so I thought. So I'm going to do a section at a time. I just use some painter's tape to hold it down just to make sure it stays in place. I'll be using just plain white acrylic paint, so I dip my brush in the paint. And a very important step to make sure it doesn't bleed underneath the stencil is to dab out as much of the paint on a paper towel so that it's almost dry to the touch. So once I'm done with this section, I peel off the stencil and I move it to the other side. But no matter how hard I tried, I just could not match up the stencils completely. There were always just a few that just were not matching up. So instead, I just decided to stencil a few at a time until the incomplete snowflakes on the edge were whole. I also covered up any areas that I didn't want to get paint on. And then from there, it was very easy to finish stenciling the rest of the snowflakes on the tree. To cover up the hole on top, I'm going to place a wooden spar to cover it. And I just lightly brush on some white paint, and then I just hot glue that down. To glue the tree to the base, you can add some glue on the trunk area and then just attach it towards the back center of the 1x2s, which was what I was going to do initially. But then I changed my mind and I thought it would look a lot better resting on top so that you can see the whole tree. So I just grabbed some 1x2s and I applied a combination of wood glue and hot glue on the bottom like so, and I attached that right in the back center. And then I applied some glue on the 1x2 and then I attached the tree right in front of that. To embellish, I wanted to add a little wreath, and I picked up this wired berry garland at Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use the whole thing just the way it is as my wreath. I like the way it looks, and it's already a perfect circle. So to attach, I will be using this little white hook from Dollar Tree. It has a sticky adhesive in the back, and it came in a pack of 12. So I hooked the wreath onto that first, and then I use that as my guide to determine where I want to place it down. I also picked up this adorable frosted berries and pine from Hobby Lobby. It was just under $1. It was 50% off. It's so pretty, and the frost, which are these really small clear beads, are not going to come off and make a mess. Next to that, I place a couple of these glass tea light candle holders from Dollar Tree, and I just place a couple battery operated tea light candles inside. And we are done, and I just love the end result. For the next DIY, I'm going to need 2 of these wooden trees, and I'm going to be making a 3-dimension tree out of them. I'm going to cut one of them in half, so I mark the center and then I score it several times with a utility knife. And it really doesn't take that long to cut because these trees are quite thin. To hide the holes on top, I'm going to cover them up with some spackle, so I apply a small amount and then I smooth it down. Now for the wooden trees that have been cut, I also add a little bit of spackle, and I place a small popsicle stick on the side to keep the spackle in place. And then I give it some time to dry and harden. And the spackle covers up the holes nicely. I'm going to paint the trees in the shade Moss from Waverly chalk paint. It's such a pretty color. So I brush on the paint all over the wooden trees, the front, back, and sides. Now I'm only going to apply one coat of the paint, even letting some of that wood underneath to show through. For the half trees, I do try my best to not apply any of the paint on the sides where it's been cut, because I will be applying glue on that. Otherwise, you can also give it a light sanding. So once the paint has dried, I apply some wood glue on the cut sides, and I place that right in the center of the tree like so. I use a couple wood blocks to help hold it in place, especially since the wood is so thin and it won't stand up on its own. You can also combine with some hot glue, and that way you don't have to hold it in place for a few minutes. For the other half tree, I also apply the glue and I attach that to the opposite side. I also use the wood blocks to hold it in place. Now for more security, I'm going to add some skewers, so I paint them the same moss color. Now these skewers are quite thin. They're the ones from Dollar Tree, but I certainly could have gone with thicker ones. So I trim the skewers to the right size, and I also snip off some of that pointy tip. You can definitely sand the skewers down so that it looks nicely fitted. And then I just glue them in place. Now this part is optional, but to make a base for the tree, I'll be using some 3/4 inch square dowels, and I trim it and glue them together to form a cross for the tree to rest on. I grab a couple of these wooden stars and I trim one in half, and then I apply glue on the half side and I place that right in the center of the star. I add some glue on the bottom of the tree and I place that right on top of the cross. Now the tree needed some little friends and it looked lonely by itself, but instead of making more, I headed to Hobby Lobby and I grabbed this blank wooden tree craft kit. So I grabbed some neutral colors that I had on hand. For the larger tree, I'm giving it a coat of the lovely sandstone shade from Waverly. To speed up the painting process and give it more opacity, I'm using a round sponge brush. For the smaller one, I'm using the shade Espresso from Craftsmart, and this is their premium metallic acrylic paint. It goes on so beautifully and it has a little shimmer to it. For the last one, I'm using Khaki from Apple Barrel. So once the paint has dried, I connect the trees and they should fit in together smoothly. A few of the trees were slightly bent, which required a bit of extra effort to get them to snugly fit. Now the tips of the trees weren't as nice and pointy as I'd like, so I decided to wrap some jute string around the tip, which actually added a really nice detail to the trees. And we are done, and I couldn't be happier with the outcome. For the next DIY, I'm going to make a simple wreath. I'll be using this wooden tree shape, as well as this brass wreath ring from Dollar Tree. I decided to stain the tree with this water-based stain from Beige in the shade Special Walnut. So I just apply that with a cloth, applying the stain all over and then wiping out the excess. I'm going to add some stenciling on the tree. This is also from that stencil pack I used earlier, and I'll be using the snowflakes pattern. So I tape it down and I cover up the areas that I don't want to get paint on. I dip my brush in the paint and then I blot out the wet brush on a paper towel before applying it over the stencil. Now my initial plan was to stencil a row of the snowflakes towards the center of each triangle section. But unfortunately, for the second row, I didn't line it up where I initially meant to line it up. I was way off, and I realized that not too long after I started applying the paint, so I decided to just go with it and somehow make it work. So for the top row, I decided to just place one snowflake on top, making it like a star for the tree, and it worked out well. I'm going to add some Christmas greenery onto the wreath ring. While Dollar Tree had some really good options that would work well, I decided to use Greenery from Hobby Lobby instead because many of their Christmas items like crafts and florals were 50% off, and some of the items that I got were actually even cheaper and of course better in quality than Dollar Tree. I got a couple of these pine and pinecone branch for the wreath, and I really love the look of these 18.5-inch branches. So to attach, I start by bending the stems of the branch to follow the curve of the wreath, and those do bend quite easily because of the wire inside. Next, I lay them in opposite direction and pushing them as close together as I'm able to. Then I take some wire jute cord and I wrap that around the center of the stem to hold the two together. And then I cut out some more of the wire jute cord. These are from Dollar Tree and I use them to attach the branches onto the ring. Now I ended up redoing the center because I realized I should have also wrapped that area around the ring directly instead of wrapping more wire cord over it, which would have just made it more bulky. So I just continue securing the branches onto the ring using the wired cord to attach it. I'm going to add a bow in the center and I'll be using this beautiful red and white ribbon from Dollar Tree to make one. I got this last summer during their patriotic decor season and I think it's just perfect for this time of year. To make a bow, first I determine how long I want my tail to be, and then I gather it on the top like so, and this will be the center of the ribbon. Then I form a loop bringing the ribbon towards the back center and pinching them together. I move the tail to the side, and then I form another loop on the opposite side. Then I twist the ribbon, making another loop, gathering it towards the center, then twisting it again, forming another loop on the opposite side and gathering it in the center. And then I form the smaller center loop like so, and then I just take a floral wire, you can also use a zip tie or pipe cleaner, and I slide that through the small center loop, and then I twist it in the back to secure. There's a bit of excess wire in the back which I will use to secure it onto the wreath. And then I just clean up the ends of the ribbon and then I secure it in place. To attach the wooden tree, I just loop some jute string right through the top hole, but before I do that, I decided to wrap some jute string around the top, about a couple inches in width. To hang, I tie the wooden tree to the top of the wreath, and I string through wooden beads and I tie the ends of the string to make a loopy hook. And this DIY is done, and I am absolutely loving how it turned out. For the final DIY, I'll be using 4 of the 12-inch 1x2s, which I got at Dollar Tree. Now they all need to be equal in size because I am going to be making a frame and I really don't want to trim anything down. So while I was at Dollar Tree, I just made sure that the pieces of wood that I got were all equal in size, and that will just save me a lot of time on this project. First thing I do is grab some paint colors, and I'm using Territorial Beige and Khaki from Apple Barrel. I'm going to apply it like a stain, so I just mix the 2 colors together and then I add some water to thin it down. I use a little rag to apply it all over, and I make sure to wipe out the excess so that you can see the wood patterns underneath. For the tree, I will be painting it white, but since I want some of the wood underneath to show through, I rub on some of that stain color on top first. The natural color is so light, and it'll just end up blending with the white paint. So once that completely dries, I start brushing on the white chalk paint. I just do about a layer of it, not too heavy, and then I just put that aside to dry completely before I give it a light sanding. To make the frame, I'm just going to glue the 4 pieces of wood together to form a rectangle, with the 2 vertical sides glued in between the ends of the other 2. I use some painter's tape to clamp it and hold it together while it dries. I also use a carpenter's square ruler just to make sure that all the corners are at a 90-degree angle. After lightly sanding the tree, it's time to put everything together. The tree is slightly too wide for the frame, so I trim a tiny bit off the wooden tree. And then I turn the side of the frame that I like down with the back side up, and then I apply some glue on the areas of the tree that hits the frame. And then I turn the tree over and glue it in place. The simple rustic tree silhouette frame is complete, and I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed creating alongside me and found some inspiration for your own Christmas decor. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more creative DIY content, and hit that bell icon to stay up to date with my latest projects. Until next time, bye!